The crisp autumn air carried whispers of hope through the streets of Chicago. It was just another Tuesday morning, the kind where the city slowly awakened to the rhythm of commuter trains and the aroma of fresh coffee wafting from corner cafes. But for one young boy named Benjamin Mitchell, this ordinary morning would become extraordinary in ways he couldn't imagine. Benjamin sat on the cold concrete steps of an abandoned storefront, his worn sneakers held together by fraying duct tape and determination. The 12-year-old's hands moved meticulously over his DIY project, basketball shoes he'd crafted from old canvas, cardboard, and whatever materials he could salvage. His fingers, calloused from countless hours of basketball practice on cracked neighborhood courts, worked diligently to secure another strip of tape around the makeshift sole. The boy's mother, Emma Mitchell, worked 3 jobs to keep their small apartment, but new basketball shoes were a luxury they couldn't afford. Still, Benjamin never complained. Instead, he channeled his creativity into making his own, drawing swooshes and designs on the sides with markers, pretending they were the same shoes he saw in store windows. Every morning, Benjamin would sit on these steps, adjusting and fixing his handmade shoes before heading to the community center's basketball court. He'd learned to arrive early, before the other kids who might tease him about his footwear. Basketball was his escape, his dream, his way of feeling connected to something bigger than his circumstances. That morning, the street was quieter than usual. The early fog hung low, creating a mystical atmosphere, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something remarkable to unfold. Benjamin was so focused on his work that he didn't notice the sleek black SUV that pulled up to the curb, or the tall figure that stepped out and paused, watching him with curious eyes. Michael Jordan had been on his way to a meeting when something about the boy's determined expression caught his attention. The greatest basketball player of all time stood there, observing the young craftsman at work. There was something familiar in the way the boy handled his makeshift shoes, an echo of Jordan's own childhood passion for the game, when he too had dreams bigger than his circumstances. The sound of approaching footsteps finally made Benjamin look up. His eyes widened in disbelief, his hands freezing mid-motion as he recognized the figure standing before him. The morning sun cast a gentle glow around Michael Jordan's silhouette, making the moment feel almost surreal. "Those are some interesting shoes you've got there," Jordan said, his voice warm and genuinely intrigued. Benjamin's heart raced as he tried to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. Michael Jordan, his hero, standing on his street, talking to him about his homemade shoes. I made them myself," Benjamin managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom can't afford real ones right now, but I wanted to play basketball anyway." There was no shame in his voice, only pure, unfiltered honesty that touched something deep in Jordan's heart. Jordan crouched down to get a better look at the shoes, examining the careful craftsmanship that went into each detail. "You know," he said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "when I was young, I had to work hard for my first pair of real basketball shoes too, but I've never seen anyone create their own like this. That takes something special." Benjamin's eyes lit up at these words. "Really? Did you ever worry about not having the right shoes to play in?" Jordan sat down beside Benjamin on the steps, ignoring the fact that his expensive suit might get dusty. "Let me tell you something about basketball and about life," he began, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. "It's not about what you're wearing on your feet. It's about what's in your heart, what drives you to wake up early and practice when everyone else is still sleeping." As they talked, a small crowd began to gather across the street, phones discreetly recording the unexpected encounter. But Jordan and Benjamin remained in their own world, sharing stories about basketball dreams and the power of determination. "Can I see how they play?" Jordan asked, pointing to the homemade shoes. Benjamin nodded eagerly, standing up to demonstrate a few dribbling moves he'd been practicing. Despite the awkward shoes, his handling was impressive, showing natural talent that hadn't been diminished by his circumstances. Jordan watched intently, noting the boy's form and the way he moved with natural grace despite his makeshift footwear. "You've got skills," he said, causing Benjamin's face to break into a wide smile. "But you know what impresses me more? Your innovation, your refusal to let circumstances stop you from playing the game you love." The crowd across the street had grown larger, but they maintained a respectful distance, sensing they were witnessing something special. Some wiped tears from their eyes as they watched the greatest basketball player of all time connect with a boy who embodied the pure love of the game. "What's your name?" Jordan asked, though he'd already made a mental note to help this determined young player. "Benjamin Mitchell, sir, but everyone calls me Ben." "Well, Ben," Jordan said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his phone, "I think it's time we got you some proper gear, but I want you to keep these shoes you made. They're a reminder that greatness starts in the heart, not on the feet." As Jordan made a few quick calls, Benjamin stood there in awe, still not quite believing. This was real. The morning sun had fully risen now, casting a golden glow over the city streets, as if nature itself was celebrating this moment of pure human connection. "Mr. Jordan," Benjamin said softly, gathering his courage, "even if I get new shoes, can you sign my old ones? They're special to me. They're the ones that got me here." Jordan's eyes softened at the request. "Those shoes tell a story, Ben. They show that you're someone who finds a way, who doesn't make excuses. That's exactly the kind of player and person I respect." Taking out a marker from his briefcase, Jordan carefully signed both of Benjamin's. Handmade shoes, adding a personal message. "To Ben, your creativity and determination inspire me. Keep soaring." MJ, by now, the crowd had grown emotional, many recording the heartwarming scene on their phones. But Jordan's focus remained entirely on Benjamin, ensuring this moment wasn't about publicity. It was about recognizing and nurturing raw passion for the game. "I have a meeting to get to," Jordan said, standing up. "But this isn't goodbye. My team is going to contact your mom today. We're going to make sure you have what you need to keep developing your game. But promise me something?" Benjamin looked up at his hero, eyes shining with tears of joy. "Anything, Mr. Jordan. Promise me you'll keep that same spirit that made you create these shoes. That determination to find a way, no matter what. Because that's what makes a true champion." As Jordan turned to leave, he paused and looked back at Benjamin. "And one more thing, keep those homemade shoes. Someday they might belong in a museum, telling the story of a young player who refused to let anything stop him from pursuing his dreams." The crowd burst into applause as Jordan walked back to his SUV, many wiping tears from their eyes. But Benjamin stood there, clutching his signed homemade shoes, understanding that this moment was about more than just meeting his hero. It was about validation of his spirit, his determination, and his unwavering love for the game. Later that day, as word of the encounter spread through social media and news outlets, the story touched millions. But for Benjamin Mitchell, the real miracle wasn't in the new shoes that would arrive, or even in meeting Michael Jordan. It was in realizing that his determination to play basketball, despite his circumstances, had shown him something powerful about himself. Something that even the greatest player of all time had recognized and celebrated. As the sun set over Chicago that evening, Benjamin sat on his bed, looking at his signed homemade shoes with pride. They were no longer just makeshift basketball shoes held together with duct tape and dreams. They were a symbol of something much more powerful, a reminder that true greatness isn't about what you have, but about what you're willing to do with what you've got. And somewhere across the city, Michael Jordan sat in his office, looking at a picture one of his team members had taken of those homemade shoes. He smiled, remembering his own journey and feeling grateful for the chance to encourage a young player who embodied the pure spirit of the game he loved. This chance encounter on a quiet Chicago morning had become more than just a moment of kindness. It had become a testament to the power of determination, creativity, and the unbreakable spirit of those who truly love the game. And for everyone who witnessed it, it served as a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with something as simple as a pair of homemade shoes and a heart full of dreams. Word of the encounter spread through Chicago like wildfire. By the time Emma Mitchell returned from her morning shift at the diner, her phone was buzzing with messages and missed calls. She stood in the doorway of their modest apartment, watching her son Benjamin carefully place his signed homemade shoes in a shoebox, treating them like precious artifacts. The afternoon sun filtered through their small window, casting a warm glow on Benjamin's face as he recounted the morning's events to his mother. Emma listened, tears welling in her eyes, as her son described how Michael Jordan had not only noticed him, but had taken the time to understand his story. "And Mom," Benjamin said, his voice filled with excitement, "Mr. Jordan's team called while you were at work. They spoke to Mrs. Anderson next door since she watches me sometimes." He paused, still processing the magnitude of what had happened. "They want to help me with basketball training and they're sending someone tomorrow." Emma sat down on their worn couch, overwhelmed by the turn of events. As a single mother working multiple jobs, she had always carried the weight of not being able to give Benjamin everything he wanted. The sight of him crafting his own basketball shoes had both broken her heart and filled her with pride at his resourcefulness. "William Anderson from next door recorded everything," Benjamin continued, showing his mother the video that was now going viral. "Look, Mom, Mr. Jordan even wrote a message on my shoes." The video showed the tender moment between the basketball legend and her son, capturing the genuine connection that had formed over a pair of homemade shoes. Emma watched as Michael Jordan treated her son not with pity, but with respect and admiration for his creativity and determination. As evening approached, there was a knock at their door. Emma opened it to find James Hall, one of Jordan's representatives, standing there with several boxes and a warm smile. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Jordan. May I come in?" The next hour was a blur of activity as James explained what Michael Jordan had set in motion. It wasn't just about new shoes or basketball gear. It was about recognizing and nurturing Benjamin's passion for the game. Mr. Jordan was deeply impressed by Benjamin's spirit, James explained, opening one of the boxes to reveal professional basketball shoes in Benjamin's size. He said it reminded him of his own journey, and he wants to make sure Benjamin has the opportunity to develop his talent. But it was the next part that left both Emma and Benjamin speechless. James pulled out an envelope containing details of a comprehensive basketball development program fully funded by Jordan himself. This includes professional coaching, access to proper facilities, and academic support to ensure Benjamin can balance basketball with his studies. Emma's hands trembled as she read through the documents. This is too much," she whispered, overwhelmed by the generosity. James smiled kindly. Mr. Jordan was very specific about this. He said, "When you see that kind of heart in a young player, you don't just give them shoes, you give them a chance to soar." As Benjamin tried on his new shoes, James continued explaining the program. Starting next week, Benjamin would train 3 times a week with Noah Mitchell, a respected youth basketball coach. The program also included transportation to and from training, ensuring Emma wouldn't have to adjust her work schedule. "But Mr. Jordan had one condition," James added, looking at Benjamin seriously. "Those homemade shoes, he wants you to keep them as a reminder of where you started. He said sometimes our greatest innovations come from our greatest challenges." Later that night, After James had left and Benjamin had finally gone to bed, though too excited to sleep, Emma sat alone in their small kitchen, looking at the viral video that had now garnered millions of views. Comments poured in from around the world, touched by her son's creativity and Jordan's compassionate response. The next morning brought more surprises. Local news stations wanted to interview Benjamin, and their story had caught the attention of national media. But what touched Emma most was the response from their own community. Sophia Green, Benjamin's teacher, called to say how proud she was of him. The local community center, where Benjamin practiced basketball, offered him special access to their courts for training. Even Mr. Turner, the gruff owner of the corner store where Benjamin bought his duct tape, had tears in his eyes when they stopped by that morning. "Your boy reminded us of something important," Mr. Turner said, refusing to let Emma pay for Benjamin's usual morning snack. "Sometimes the biggest dreams start with the smallest things, like a pair of handmade shoes." As they walked home, Benjamin noticed other kids playing basketball in the neighborhood. Some of them used to tease him about his homemade shoes, but now they looked at him differently, not with envy for his new shoes, but with respect for what his old ones represented. "Mom," Benjamin said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the sidewalk, "I want to do something with my old shoes besides just keeping them. Can we think of a way to help other kids who love basketball but can't afford shoes?" Emma looked at her son, her heart swelling with pride. Even with all the attention and gifts, Benjamin's first thought was how to help others. This was the same spirit that had led him to create his own shoes rather than give up on his dreams. That afternoon, Benjamin had his first session with Coach Noah. As they worked on basic drills, Noah noticed something interesting about Benjamin's playing style. "You've developed some unique moves to compensate for your old shoes," he observed. "Those adaptations might actually give you an advantage now." Benjamin thought about this, remembering all the hours he'd spent practicing in his homemade shoes. "Mr. Jordan said something similar," he replied. "He said sometimes our challenges make us stronger." The impact of Benjamin's story continued to ripple through the community. Other parents began sharing stories of their children's innovation and determination. A local youth center started a program called Dream Makers, inspired by Benjamin's story, to help kids pursue their passions despite financial constraints. Michael Jordan's team kept in close contact, monitoring Benjamin's progress and ensuring both he and Emma had everything they needed. But more than the material support, it was Jordan's recognition of Benjamin's spirit that had the most profound impact. A week after their encounter, a special package arrived at the Mitchell's apartment. Inside was a custom display case for Benjamin's homemade shoes with a plaque that read, "Innovation born from determination. Keep soaring, Ben. MJ." Emma watched as Benjamin carefully placed his old shoes in the case, handling them with the same care he'd shown while creating them. These weren't just shoes anymore. They were a symbol of hope for anyone who ever had to find creative ways to chase their dreams. That evening, as Benjamin practiced on the community court in his new shoes, Emma noticed something different about his game. He played with the same determination as before, but now there was something more, a confidence that came from knowing that his creativity and perseverance had been seen and valued by someone he admired. As the sun set over Chicago, casting long shadows across the basketball court, Emma thought about how a simple pair of homemade shoes had changed their lives. But it wasn't really about the shoes, she realized. It was about a boy who refused to let circumstances define his dreams, and a sports legend who recognized himself in that same spirit. Benjamin's story had become more than just a viral moment or a heartwarming encounter. It had become a reminder that sometimes the most powerful dreams are born not from having everything we need, but from finding creative ways to work with what we have. As mother and son walked home that evening, Benjamin carrying his basketball and wearing his new shoes, Emma realized that Michael Jordan had given her son something far more valuable than athletic gear or training opportunities. He had shown Benjamin that his determination and creativity were worth more than any pair of store-bought shoes could ever be. And somewhere in Chicago, in a display case in a small apartment, a pair of handmade basketball shoes stood as a testament to the power of dreams, determination, and the extraordinary things that can happen when someone believes in the spirit behind a young person's innovation. 3 months had passed since that fateful morning when Michael Jordan discovered Benjamin Mitchell and his homemade shoes. The crisp autumn air had given way to winter's chill, but inside the heated gymnasium of the Chicago Youth Sports Center, Benjamin was burning up the court with an intensity that made his coach smile. Noah Mitchell watched as his young protege executed a perfect crossover dribble, a move they'd been practicing for weeks. Benjamin's progress hadn't just been good, it had been extraordinary. The boy who once practiced in duct-taped shoes now moved with a grace and confidence that turned heads. "You're getting faster, Ben," Coach Noah called out, making notes on his clipboard. "But remember what we talked about. Speed is nothing without control." Benjamin nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. He'd taken every piece of coaching advice to heart, treating each session as if Michael Jordan himself was watching. In a way, he was. Weekly progress reports were sent to Jordan's team, and occasionally Jordan himself would send personal notes of encouragement. Today was special, though. The Youth Center was hosting its first Dream Makers basketball clinic, an initiative inspired by Benjamin's story. 20 kids from underprivileged backgrounds, each selected based on their passion for basketball and their innovative spirit, would be attending. Benjamin, despite his young age, would be helping to run the clinic alongside Coach Noah. As the kids began filing into the gym, Benjamin noticed their wide-eyed expressions, the same look he'd had 3 months ago when his life changed. Many of them wore worn-out shoes or hand-me-downs, but all of them carried the unmistakable enthusiasm of true basketball lovers. "Remember when that was you?" Emma Mitchell whispered to her son as she helped set up refreshments. She'd taken the morning off from the diner to volunteer at the clinic, proud to be part of something that was helping other kids like Benjamin. Benjamin smiled, touching the whistle Coach Noah had given him for the clinic. "That's why today is so important, Mom. We're not just teaching basketball, we're showing them that their dreams matter." The clinic began with Benjamin sharing his story. Standing before the group of eager young players, he held up his preserved, homemade shoes, now a symbol of determination that had inspired thousands through social media and news coverage. "These shoes remind me that it's not about what you have," Benjamin said, his voice clear and confident. "It's about what you're willing to do with what you've got. Mr. Jordan taught me that, and now I want to share it with you." Among the attendees was Oliver Clark, a 10-year-old who had created his own basketball from rolled-up socks and duct tape when he couldn't afford a real one. His innovation had caught the attention of the program organizers, and now he stood in the gym, clutching a brand-new basketball provided by the program. As Benjamin led the young players through warm-up drills, Coach Noah observed how naturally he took to mentoring. The shy boy who once practiced alone to avoid teasing had transformed into a confident young leader who made sure every kid felt included and valued. Halfway through the clinic, an unexpected visitor arrived. The gym doors opened, and Michael, Jordan's representative, James Hall, walked in accompanied by a film crew. The kids whispered excitedly, but Benjamin kept them focused on their drills, showing a maturity beyond his years. "Mr. Jordan wanted to document today," James explained to Emma and Coach Noah. "He believes Benjamin's story is just the beginning. These kids, their creativity and determination, it's something the world needs to see." The camera crew captured moments that would later move millions. Oliver Clark teaching others his sockball technique, Benjamin demonstrating dribbling skills he'd developed using his homemade shoes, and kids from different neighborhoods coming together through their shared love of basketball. During a water break, James pulled Benjamin aside to share some news. "Mr. Jordan has been watching your progress, Ben. He's impressed not just with your basketball skills, but with how you're helping other kids. He has a surprise planned for next week." As the clinic continued, parents began arriving to watch. Among them was Sophia Anderson, a single mother whose daughter had been inspired by Benjamin's story to create her own basketball training tools using household items. The sight of her daughter confidently practicing with proper equipment brought tears to her eyes. "Your son did more than inspire these kids to play basketball," she told Emma. "He showed them that their circumstances don't define their worth." The afternoon session of the clinic focused on something unique: innovation stations, where kids could share their own creative solutions for practicing basketball with limited resources. Benjamin had suggested this addition, remembering how his own innovation had caught Jordan's attention. "Sometimes the best ideas come from having to think differently," Benjamin explained to the group. "My homemade shoes taught me that. Now I want to see what you've all come up with." The innovations were remarkable. One boy had created a target practice system using cardboard boxes and paper plates. A girl demonstrated how she used chalk lines on her basement wall to practice different shooting angles. Each creation showed the same spirit that had driven Benjamin to make his own shoes. As the clinic drew to a close, James gathered everyone for an announcement. "Thanks to the success of today's event, the Dreammakers program will be expanding. Mr. Jordan has committed to funding monthly clinics and providing equipment for kids who show the same innovative spirit we've seen here today." The gym erupted in cheers, but Benjamin's attention was drawn to Oliver Clark, who stood quietly clutching his new basketball. Walking over, Benjamin asked, "What are you thinking about?" Oliver looked up, his eyes bright with inspiration. "I was thinking maybe my sock ball could help kids who can't afford basketballs, like how your shoes helped people see that we can find ways to play no matter what." Benjamin smiled, recognizing the same spark that had driven him to create his shoes. "That's a great idea. Maybe we can work on that together at the next clinic." As the day wound down and the last families left the gym, Benjamin sat on the bleachers, his old homemade shoes in his lap. Coach Noah joined him, carrying his ever-present clipboard. "You know what I wrote in today's report to Mr. Jordan?" Noah asked, showing Benjamin the clipboard. "I wrote that the real breakthrough wasn't in your jump shot or your dribbling, though those have improved tremendously. The real breakthrough was in seeing you become a leader who lifts others up." Benjamin ran his fingers over the message Jordan had written on his old shoes. "When Mr. Jordan noticed me that day, he didn't just give me new shoes. He showed me that someone believed in me. That's what I want these kids to feel." Emma watched her son from across the gym, marveling at how much he'd grown, not just in his basketball skills, but in his understanding of what it meant to make a difference in others' lives. Later that evening, as Benjamin practiced his shooting, in the fading light of the community court, a group of younger kids gathered to watch. They were the same ones who used to tease him about his homemade shoes. Now they asked if he could teach them some moves. "First thing tomorrow," Benjamin promised. "Everyone's welcome on this court." As mother and son walked home, Emma noticed Benjamin was unusually quiet. "What's on your mind, baby?" she asked. Benjamin looked up at the stars becoming visible in the darkening sky. "I was thinking about what Mr. Jordan's surprise might be next week, but also I was thinking about how one morning changed everything, not just for us, but for all those kids today." Emma pulled her son close. "That morning didn't just change things, Benjamin. It showed everyone what I already knew about you, that you have a beautiful heart and an unstoppable spirit." At home, Benjamin carefully placed his old shoes back in their display case. Next to them stood a new addition, a photograph from today's clinic, showing him teaching a group of eager young players. The contrast between the worn, handmade shoes and the smiling faces in the photo told a story of transformation, not just of one boy's life, but of an entire community's perspective on what was possible. As Benjamin fell asleep that night, his new basketball shoes neatly placed by his bed, he smiled, thinking about Oliver Clark and his sock ball, about all the kids at the clinic and their innovative creations. His last thought before drifting off was that maybe, just maybe, his homemade shoes had started something bigger than he could have ever imagined. And somewhere in Chicago, Michael Jordan reviewed the footage from the day's clinic, smiling as he watched the boy whose determination had caught his attention that autumn morning, now passing that same spirit on to others. The surprise he had planned for next week would be special. But what Benjamin had done today, that was the real magic. The morning began like any other at the Chicago Youth Sports Center, with Benjamin Mitchell arriving early for his regular training session. But there was something different in the air, a buzz of excitement that Coach Noah couldn't quite hide, despite his attempts to maintain their normal routine. "Just focus on your drills, Ben," Noah said with a slight smile, checking his phone more frequently than usual. "Today's going to be special." Benjamin had spent the week wondering about the surprise James Hall had mentioned, but no one would give him any hints. Even his mother, Emma, seemed to be in on whatever was coming, judging by her barely contained excitement when she dropped him off that morning. As Benjamin worked through his warm-up routine, he noticed more people arriving. At the center than usual, William Hall, the center's director, was hustling about, speaking in hushed tones with his staff. The maintenance crew had been busy since dawn, making sure every inch of the facility sparkled, just as Benjamin finished his third set of shooting. Drills, the gym doors opened. Michael Jordan himself walked in, accompanied by several people Benjamin recognized from television. Professional basketball players, both current stars and legends of the game. "How's that jump shot coming along, Ben?" Jordan called out, his voice carrying across the court. Benjamin stood frozen, basketball in hand, as his hero approached. But this time, it wasn't just about meeting Michael Jordan. It was about showing him how hard he'd worked since that first encounter. "Would you mind showing us?" Jordan asked, gesturing to the hoop. Benjamin took a deep breath, remembering everything Coach Noah had taught him. He executed a perfect jump shot, the ball arcing gracefully through the air before swishing through the net. The gathered athletes applauded, genuine appreciation in their eyes. "Now that's what I call progress," Jordan said, placing a hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "But today isn't just about basketball. It's about something bigger." The gym doors opened again, and Benjamin's heart nearly stopped. Filing in were dozens of kids, each wearing similar homemade basketball shoes to the ones he'd created. Some had used duct tape like he had, others had found different creative solutions, but all of them shared the same determined spirit. "These are the dreamers," Jordan explained. "Kids from across the country who, like you, refuse to let their circumstances stop them from playing the game they love. When your story went viral, they started sharing their own stories, and now we're going to help them all." What followed was beyond anything Benjamin could have imagined. Jordan announced the official launch of the Dreammakers Foundation, a nationwide program inspired by Benjamin's homemade shoes. The foundation would provide basketball equipment, training, and educational support to young players who demonstrated innovative spirit and determination. "But here's the really special part," Jordan continued, turning to Benjamin. "We want you to be our first youth ambassador. Your story started this movement, and you've shown incredible leadership in helping other kids. What do you say?" Benjamin looked at his mother, who had tears in her eyes as she nodded encouragingly. I'd be honored, Mr. Jordan. But what Exactly what I do. Jordan's smile widened. You'll help us identify other kids with that special spark, the ones who find creative ways to pursue their dreams despite obstacles. You'll share your story at schools and youth centers, inspiring others to believe in themselves. And most importantly, you'll help us understand what these young players really need. The professional players spread out across the court, each taking a group of kids to work with. Benjamin watched in amazement as his simple story of homemade shoes had transformed into something that was changing lives across the country. Oliver Clark, the boy with the sock ball from last week's clinic, was there too. Jordan had specifically requested his presence after hearing about his innovation. Your sock ball design is pretty impressive, Jordan told him. We're actually going to have our equipment team look at incorporating some of your ideas into a new line of training tools. As the morning progressed, Benjamin moved between groups, sharing his experiences and connecting with kids who reminded him so much of himself just a few months ago. Each had their own story of innovation and determination, and each one touched his heart in a different way. Emma Mitchell watched from the sidelines, remembering the mornings she'd found Benjamin fixing his homemade shoes before school. Now here he was, standing tall among basketball legends, helping other kids believe in their dreams. Your son is quite something, James Hall said, joining her. When Mr. Jordan first met him, he saw something special. But what Benjamin's done with that opportunity, how he's used it to lift others up, that's exceeded everyone's expectations. The surprise wasn't over yet. Jordan gathered everyone at center court for another announcement. Starting next season, during every Chicago home game, we'll be honoring one young dream maker in front of the crowd. They'll get to meet the teams, share their story, and inspire others. And Benjamin, you'll help us choose these young innovators. The gym erupted in cheers, but Jordan raised his hand for silence. There's more. Benjamin's original shoes, the ones that started all this, they're going into the Basketball Hall of Fame as part of a new exhibit about the spirit of the game. We want future generations to see that greatness doesn't come from having the best equipment. It comes from having the heart to find a way, no matter what. Benjamin felt tears welling up in his eyes. His homemade shoes, the ones some kids had teased him about, would now be enshrined alongside the greatest moments in basketball history. But before they go to the Hall of Fame, Jordan continued, they're going on a tour. We're taking them to youth centers across the country, along with this whole group of dream makers, to show kids everywhere that their innovations and determination matter. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. Professional players worked with the kids, sharing tips and techniques. But more importantly, they listened to each child's story, understanding that these young players needed more than just basketball skills. They needed to know their creativity and perseverance were valued. Late in the afternoon, as things were, winding down, Jordan pulled Benjamin aside for a private conversation. You know what impressed me most that morning I met you? He asked. Benjamin shook his head. It wasn't just the shoes you made. It was that you weren't out there asking for help or feeling sorry for yourself. You were finding a way to play the game you love. That's why your story resonates with so many people, because it's about the pure love of basketball and the determination to play, no matter what. As the day came to a close, Benjamin stood at center court with his mother, Coach Noah, and Michael Jordan, watching as the young dream makers left with new equipment, new skills, and new confidence. But more importantly, they left knowing they were part of something bigger than themselves. Mr. Jordan, Benjamin said quietly, thank you for noticing me that morning, but even more, thank you for helping me notice others who just need a chance. Jordan smiled. That's what this is all about, Ben. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything. You proved that. Now we're going to help others prove it too. As Benjamin and Emma walked home that evening, they passed the steps where Jordan had first noticed him working on his shoes. Benjamin paused, looking at the spot where his life had changed. "You know what, Mum? Those shoes weren't just about playing basketball. They were about believing that there's always a way if you want something badly enough." Emma hugged her son close. "And now you're helping other kids believe that too." That night, Benjamin sat at his desk, writing in the journal Coach Noah had given him to document his journey. Tomorrow, his old shoes would begin their journey to inspire others, but their real magic had already done its work, not just in changing his life, but in showing countless other young dreamers that their innovations, their determination, and their love for the game were worthy of recognition and support. As he wrote, Benjamin smiled, thinking about all the other homemade shoes, sock balls, and creative solutions that kids across the country were using to play the game they loved. His story wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about the power of innovation, determination, and the amazing things that can happen when someone believes in a young person's dreams. The anticipation in the packed Detroit Community Center was electric. 6 weeks had passed since the launch of the Dream Makers Foundation, and this was the first stop on the national tour. Benjamin Mitchell stood backstage, clutching the display case containing his famous homemade shoes, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "Remember," Coach Noah said, adjusting Benjamin's tie, "just speak from your heart, like we practiced. Your story is powerful because it's real." Emma Mitchell watched proudly as her 12-year-old son prepared to address his largest audience yet. In the past weeks, she'd watched him practice his speech countless times, seeing him grow more confident with each rehearsal. But this was different. This was Detroit, where hundreds of young basketball enthusiasts awaited his words. James Hall appeared, clipboard in hand. "5 minutes, Ben. The local kids are ready with their innovations. Wait until you see what they've created. It's going to blow you away." Benjamin peeked through the curtain. The community center's gym was filled with families, local coaches, and most importantly, kids who reminded him so much of himself. In the front row, he spotted several young players clutching their own innovative basketball gear, homemade. Training equipment, modified shoes, and creative practice tools. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, "please welcome our Dream Makers Youth Ambassador, Benjamin Mitchell." Taking a deep breath, Benjamin walked onto the stage, carefully carrying his display case. The crowd erupted in applause, but it was the eager faces of the kids in the front row that gave him courage. "6 months ago," Benjamin began, his voice clear and strong, "I sat on some steps in Chicago, fixing my homemade basketball shoes with duct tape. I wasn't trying to inspire anyone. I just wanted to play basketball, and I wasn't going to let not having the right shoes stop me." He opened the display case, carefully lifting out his original shoes. "These shoes taught me something important. Sometimes our biggest obstacles can lead to our greatest innovations. But more than that, they taught me that there are kids everywhere who find creative ways to pursue their dreams." The crowd listened intently as Benjamin shared his story, but he quickly turned the spotlight to the local youth. "Today, I want to hear your stories. I want to see how you found ways to play the game you love." One by one, young players from Detroit came forward, sharing their innovations. 12-year-old Isabella Turner had created a basketball return system using household items and rubber bands. Noah Phillips, age 13, demonstrated a dribbling practice tool made from recycled materials. But it was 9-year-old Charlotte Hall who brought tears to many eyes. She had taken her older brother's worn-out wheelchair and transformed it into a mobile basketball practice station, allowing her to play despite her limited mobility. "This is what Dream Makers is really about," Benjamin said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's about seeing the creativity and determination in every single one of you. The event transformed from a simple presentation into a celebration of innovation. Professional coaches who had accompanied the tour worked with the kids, helping them refine their techniques while respecting the unique solutions they'd developed. During the workshops that followed, Benjamin moved from group to group, no longer feeling like a presenter but rather a fellow dreamer sharing in their joy. He watched as Charlotte Hall taught others how to use her wheelchair basketball station, her face glowing with pride as other kids praised her invention. "You know what's remarkable?" James Hall said to Emma as they watched Benjamin interact with the Detroit kids. "He's not just telling his story anymore, he's helping them tell theirs." The afternoon brought another surprise. Michael Jordan appeared via video link, announcing that the Dream Makers Foundation would be establishing a permanent innovation lab in Detroit, where young players could develop and share their basketball training ideas. Benjamin's shoes showed us that innovation can come from anywhere, Jordan said on the screen. "Now we want to give every young dreamer the chance to turn their ideas into reality." The announcement was met with thunderous applause, but Benjamin's attention was drawn to Charlotte Hall, who had tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "Nothing's wrong," she smiled. "It's just, I always thought my ideas weren't good enough because I can't play like everyone else. But today, people are saying my wheelchair station could help other kids like me." Benjamin understood exactly how she felt. "That's what makes your invention even more special," he told her. "You didn't just solve a problem for yourself. You might have helped change the game for lots of other kids too." As the day progressed, the Dream Makers team documented each innovation, photographing and recording the stories behind them. These would become part of a growing digital library, inspiring young players around the country to share their own creative solutions. During a break, Benjamin sat with Oliver Clark, who had traveled from Chicago to help with the tour. The two boys had become close friends, united by their innovative spirits. "It's different being on this side of things," Benjamin reflected. "When Mr. Jordan noticed my shoes, I had no idea it would lead to all this." Oliver nodded, watching. As kids continued to practice with their homemade equipment, "You know what's cool? Every kid here probably has a story like yours. They just needed someone to show them it was worth telling." The event concluded with a special ceremony. Each young innovator received a Dream Maker certificate, but more importantly, they were given the resources to develop their ideas further. Charlotte's wheelchair basketball station would be professionally prototyped. Isabella's return system would be refined by engineers, and Noah's dribbling tool would be tested in youth programs. As Benjamin prepared to leave Detroit, Charlotte Hall's mother approached him with tears in her eyes. "Before today, my daughter was ready to give up on basketball. Now she's talking about designing equipment for other kids with disabilities. You did that, Benjamin. Your story showed her that different doesn't mean less." On the flight back to Chicago that evening, Benjamin sat quietly, looking through photos from the day. Emma noticed her son's thoughtful expression. "What's on your mind, baby?" "I was thinking about how Mr. Jordan said innovation can come from anywhere," Benjamin replied. "Today proved that. But it's not just about basketball anymore, is it? It's about showing kids that their ideas matter, that their creativity is valuable." Coach Noah, sitting across the aisle, smiled. "That's exactly right, Ben. And you know what? Your role isn't just about inspiring them. It's about learning from them too. Each city we visit, each kid we meet, they're all adding their own chapter to this story." Back home in Chicago, Benjamin couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, writing in his journal about everything he'd seen in Detroit. His original shoes sat in their display case nearby, ready for the next stop on the tour. "Dear Diary," he wrote, "today I met a girl who turned a wheelchair into a basketball training station. I met a boy who made a dribbling tool from recycled materials. I met dreamers who reminded me that there's no one way to love basketball. My homemade shoes were just the beginning. The real story is about all the amazing ideas that kids have when someone gives them a chance to share them. The next morning, Benjamin received an email from Michael Jordan himself. "Ben, I watched the videos from Detroit. What you're doing now, helping other kids believe in their innovations, that's even more important than the shoes that started it all. Keep listening to their stories. Keep showing them that their creativity matters. You're not just helping them become better basketball players, you're helping them become confident innovators who will change the game in their own unique ways." MJs. Benjamin got ready for school. He looked at his new basketball shoes, then at the empty display case where his old ones had been. The homemade shoes were on their way to the next city, but their spirit lived on in every young player who dared to find their own way to play the game they loved. Emma found her son standing at the window, lost in thought. "Ready for school?" Benjamin smiled. "You know what, Mom? I used to think making those shoes was about solving a problem. Now I understand it was about showing others that every problem has a solution. We just have to be brave enough to create it." The Dream Makers tour would continue, city by city, collecting stories of young innovators who, like Benjamin, refused to let circumstances define their dreams. But more than that, it was creating a community of young people who understood that their creativity, their determination, and their unique perspectives could change the game, not just in basketball, but in life. 1 year to the day after Michael Jordan first noticed Benjamin Mitchell and his homemade shoes, the Chicago United Center buzzed with anticipation. The Dream Makers National Tour had completed its journey across all 50 states, touching thousands of young lives and collecting countless stories of innovation and determination. Tonight was more than just the tour's conclusion. It was a celebration of how one boy's creativity had sparked a movement that changed youth basketball forever. The arena was filled with familiar faces from Benjamin's journey. Charlotte Hall with her revolutionary wheelchair training system, Oliver Clark and his refined sock ball design, and hundreds of other young innovators whose creations had become part of the Dream Makers story. Benjamin stood in the players' tunnel, adjusting his tie as he prepared to address the sold-out crowd. At 13 now, he'd grown taller, more confident, but the humble spirit that had driven him to create those first shoes remained unchanged. "Ready for this?" Emma Mitchell asked, straightening her son's collar. She looked different too. No longer wearing her diner uniform, but rather a smart business suit that reflected her new role as community coordinator for the Dream Makers Foundation. "I think so," Benjamin replied, looking out at the gathering crowd. "It's strange being back. Here, Mom, a year ago I was just trying to find a way to play basketball. Now..." His voice trailed off as Michael Jordan approached, accompanied by James Hall and coach Noah Mitchell. "Now you're helping thousands of other kids find their way," Jordan completed the thought. "That's what makes this special, Ben. It was never just about the shoes. The evening's event had been carefully planned as both a celebration and a launch. The Dream Makers Foundation was unveiling its permanent program, which would establish innovation centers in communities across the country. But first, there would be a tribute to the year-long journey that had started with a pair of homemade shoes. As Benjamin walked onto the court, the arena lights dimmed, and a video began playing on the massive screens. Images flashed across the display. Benjamin on those steps that first morning, the viral moments from each city on the tour, young innovators sharing their creations, and communities coming together to support their young dreamers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice echoed through the arena, "please welcome Dream Makers Youth Ambassador Benjamin Mitchell." The applause was deafening, but Benjamin's focus was on the young faces in the front rows, kids wearing shoes and equipment they'd created themselves, each with a story of determination that paralleled his own. A year ago, Benjamin began, his voice steady and clear. "I sat on some steps in Chicago, fixing my homemade basketball shoes. I never imagined that morning would change my life, or that those shoes would travel across the country, inspiring others to share their own innovations." He gestured to the first row, where Charlotte Hall sat in her modified wheelchair. But what we discovered on this journey was something bigger than basketball. We found that when you give young people the chance to solve problems their own way, they come up with solutions that can help everyone. The lights came up on a special section of the arena, where displays showcased innovations from the tour. Charlotte's wheelchair training station had evolved into a full adaptive basketball program. Oliver Clark's sockball design had been developed into an affordable practice tool now used in schools nationwide. Each innovation told a story of creativity born from necessity. Michael Jordan joined Benjamin on court, carrying the display case with the original shoes that had started it all. "These shoes are heading to the Hall of Fame," Jordan announced, "but their legacy lives on in every young player who dares to find their own way to play the game they love." The screens above showed live feeds from Dreammakers events happening simultaneously in communities across the country. In Detroit, Isabella Turner was teaching younger kids how to build her basketball return system. In Seattle, Noah Phillips demonstrated his dribbling tool to a group of eager players. The movement had taken on a life of its own. "Today," Benjamin continued, "we're announcing that the Dreammakers Foundation will establish permanent innovation labs in 50 cities. These aren't just places to play basketball. They're spaces where young players can develop their ideas, share their solutions, and show the world that innovation comes in all forms." The announcement was met with thunderous applause, but the evening's biggest surprise was yet to come. Jordan stepped forward again, this time carrying a prototype basketball shoe. "This," he said, holding up the shoe, "is the Dreammakers Special Edition. Its design incorporates elements from innovations we saw on the tour, including Ben's original concept. But here's what makes it truly special. All proceeds will fund basketball innovation programs in underserved communities." Benjamin examined the shoe with amazement. The design included features inspired by his homemade creation, but refined and enhanced by the ideas of young innovators from across the country. It was a testament to the collaborative spirit that had defined the Dreammakers' journey. The evening continued with demonstrations from young innovators, each sharing how their ideas had evolved over the year. Charlotte Hall showed how her wheelchair training station had been adapted for different abilities. Oliver Clark's sockball demonstration drew cheers as he showed how his simple invention had helped kids develop better ball control. During a break in the presentations, Benjamin found a quiet moment with Coach Noah. "Remember when you first started training me?" he asked. "Did you ever think it would lead to all this?" Noah smiled, watching the young innovators on the court. "What I saw in you wasn't just basketball talent, Ben. It was the spirit to find a way no matter what. That's what this program is really about, nurturing that spirit in every young player." As the event drew to a close, Benjamin had one final surprise for the audience. "Throughout this year, we've seen amazing innovations," he said. "But what matters most isn't the equipment we create. It's the determination behind each creation. So tonight, I want to challenge everyone here. What will you create to make the game more accessible for others?" The challenge was accompanied by the announcement of the first Dreammakers Innovation Competition, where young players from around the world could submit their ideas for making basketball more inclusive and accessible. Emma watched from the sidelines as her son handled questions from the media with poise and authenticity. She remembered the mornings spent helping him fix those homemade shoes, never imagining they would lead to this moment. Later that night, After the crowds had gone and the arena had quieted, Benjamin stood at center court with his mother, Coach Noah, and Michael Jordan. His original shoes, soon to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame, sat in their display case nearby. "You know what I learned this year?" Benjamin said, looking at his old shoes. "Innovation isn't just about solving problems. It's about showing others that their problems are worth solving, that their ideas matter." Jordan nodded, placing a hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "That's why this program will continue growing. Because somewhere out there, another kid is creating something amazing, just waiting for someone to notice." As they prepared to leave, Benjamin took one last look around the arena. The displays of young innovators' creations would remain as a traveling exhibition, inspiring future generations of players to think creatively about the game they love. "Mom," he said as they walked toward the exit, "remember when you used to worry about not being able to buy me new shoes?" Emma hugged her. "Son, close. And now look at you, helping other kids turn their challenges into opportunities." The next morning, Benjamin returned to those same steps where Jordan had first noticed him, but this time he wasn't alone. A group of young players gathered around, each eager to share their own innovations and dreams. As Benjamin listened to their stories, he realized that his journey hadn't just been about basketball or creativity or even innovation. It had been about showing young people everywhere that their circumstances didn't define their potential. The Dream Makers program would continue to evolve, but its core message would remain unchanged. Sometimes the most powerful solutions come from those who have to find another way. Benjamin's homemade shoes had opened the door, but it was the spirit of thousands of young innovators that would keep it open for generations to come. Looking at the eager faces around him, Benjamin smiled, remembering Jordan's words from that first morning. "It's not about what you're wearing on your feet, it's about what's in your heart." A year later, those words rang truer than ever. The game of basketball had been changed, not by professional athletes or equipment manufacturers, but by young dreamers who refused to let circumstances stand in their way. And somewhere in the Basketball Hall of Fame, a pair of homemade shoes would tell their story, not just of one boy's determination to play the game he loved, but of a movement that showed the world that innovation knows no age, no limitations, and no boundaries. The Dream Makers story had come full circle, but in many ways, it was just beginning. For every Benjamin Mitchell out there was a Charlotte Hall, an Oliver Clark, or an Isabella Turner, each with their own unique way of changing the game. And that, perhaps, was the greatest legacy of all.